What happens when Donald Trump tries to humiliate Barack Obama in front of the world, only for Obama to answer with one sentence so sharp it silences the room and rewrites the headlines? The press room in Washington was already thick with tension. Before anyone said a word, reporters were crowded shoulder to shoulder, pens tapping nervously on notepads, cameras poised, microphones extended like hungry mouths waiting to catch the next soundbite. Everyone knew the atmosphere could shift in a heartbeat. It often did when President Trump was behind the podium. He leaned forward, eyes narrowing as though he had spotted his target. Then came the jab, Barack Obama. He did nothing but talk, 8 years of speeches, zero results, that's the truth. The words dropped like a stone in a still pond. Gasps rippled through the room, quick whispers breaking out between reporters. A few raised their eyebrows. Others smirked as if waiting for the drama that always seemed to follow. The camera zoomed in tighter, catching every twitch, every glance. But here's the thing. Barack Obama was in the room. He hadn't come for a fight. He was there for a bipartisan event on education, sitting quietly to the side, his posture as steady as ever. He had been listening. Not seeking attention. For many, his presence was symbolic. A reminder of a different time for Trump. It was an opportunity to score a headline. A young reporter from St. Louis whispered into her recorder, "Trump takes aim at Obama." Another from Phoenix scribbled mockery in bold letters across his notes. The air shifted as people began to wonder, would Obama respond? Trump continued, his voice rising. "The media loves him, but the truth, he left this country weak. He talked about hope, but hope doesn't pay the bills. We're stronger now than ever before." His hand slammed on the podium for emphasis. Some of the reporters nodded in rhythm, not in agreement, but in recognition. This was the Trump they had come to expect, sharp, combative, unwilling to let go once he had found a target across the room. Obama adjusted his tie ever so slightly. It was the smallest movement, but it caught eyes. A CNN camera zoomed in, his lips pressed together in a straight line. He looked calm, almost too calm, like someone who had been here before and already knew the ending. A veteran journalist from Dallas whispered to her colleague, "If he says something, it's going to be big." The crowd knew what Trump was doing. He thrived on confrontation, on turning the spotlight into a weapon. And yet here sat the former president, composed, patient, his silence louder than any words spoken so far. For a brief second, there was a sense that the room itself was holding its breath. The contrast couldn't be sharper. One man animated, gesturing, punctuating every sentence with fire, and the other a still figure, deliberate, almost meditative. Trump pointed toward Obama's side of the room. "There he is, Mr. Talker. All speeches, no action. People are tired of it." The words hung in the air, heavier this time. A few reporters turned to Obama, waiting. A Fox News journalist mouthed to a colleague, "Will he take it?" Obama finally moved. He didn't stand right away. Instead, he leaned forward, folded his hands, and glanced toward the podium. His eyes met Trump's for a fleeting moment, the kind of look that carried more weight than 1,000 words. Trump grinned, thinking he had control of the moment. "See, silent. That's what I mean. No answers, no fight." The smirk spread across his face, a showman's confidence. But those who knew Obama, who had studied his rhythm and timing over the years, recognized something different. He wasn't silent because he had no answer. He was silent because he was choosing his moment, a reporter near the front row whispered. "This feels like one of those times." The camera stayed locked on Obama. His slow movements were intentional. He pushed his chair back, the scraping sound cutting through the chatter. He rose to his feet, tall and steady, his face unreadable. His presence alone shifted the energy, like the sound of thunder before a storm. The room leaned in, even the photographers, usually immune to suspense, after years of covering politics, tightened their grips on their cameras. Obama walked toward the microphone, not rushed, not dragged out, but at a pace that said he was in no hurry to win anyone's approval. He adjusted the mic stand slightly lower, the metal screech echoing faintly in the packed room. He paused, just that pause. Alone seemed to stretch for seconds longer than anyone expected. People glanced at each other, eyebrows raised, silence in a room filled with noise has a way of demanding attention. Reporters whispered frantically, trying to predict what was coming. Trump leaned back slightly, arms crossed, smirk still in place, but his eyes flickered with something that almost looked like doubt. Obama scanned the room, not rushing, letting the weight of the moment do the work for him. When his lips finally parted, the entire room felt as though it tilted toward him. Every microphone, every camera, every heartbeat waiting to catch his words, but before he spoke, something even more powerful happened. The room realized the balance of control had already shifted the moment Obama rose to his feet. The press room transformed 1,000 small sounds pens, scratching fingers, tapping keyboards, camera shutters clicking, seemed to collapse into one rhythm, all syncing to the steps of the former president as he approached the microphone. Trump stood at the podium, chin lifted, watching. His smirk stayed, but it didn't stretch as wide as before. For once, he wasn't the only performer in the spotlight. Obama placed both hands on the podium. Fingers spread flat, he didn't speak yet. He just stood there, steady, shoulders squared, letting the silence build. The reporters could feel it. Even those who had covered dozens of fiery exchanges knew this was different. There was no shouting match, no interruption, only suspense, thick and electric. A journalist from Seattle leaned forward, whispering to the person beside her. He's pulling the room in without a word. Trump leaned closer to his microphone. What's it going to be, Barack? Another speech about hope, another promise you couldn't keep. His voice was sharp, but there was a nervous rhythm behind it, as if he was speaking faster than he meant to. Obama finally lifted his head and looked across the room. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he let his eyes sweep the rows of journalists, the cameras, the aides. It was the kind of look that carried gravity, the kind that made even those at home watching on television feel like he was speaking to them. When he did speak, his voice was low, steady, almost conversational. This isn't about me. It's about the country we all share. That single line wasn't the sentence that would end up going viral, but it was the opening move and everyone felt it. The tone was set. Trump chuckled into the mic, shaking his head. There he goes again, country this country, that people are tired of speeches. They want results. A few murmurs echoed through the room. A younger journalist covering the White House for the first time wrote furiously in his notepad, contrast between noise and calm. Obama didn't flinch. He shifted his weight, one hand still resting on the podium, the other gesturing slightly as if inviting the audience into the thought. Results come from vision. Without vision, power is just noise. The line stung, not because it was loud or flashy, but because it landed with a weight that the room recognized instantly. Several heads turned to gauge Trump's reaction. His smirk faltered for the briefest second, before returning in a thinner form. Trump responded quickly, leaning forward again. Vision, we're finally winning again. Look around, markets are up, jobs are back. People are proud to be Americans again. Obama tilted his head slightly, the way a professor might when a student made a point worth acknowledging. Pride isn't measured in numbers. Pride is measured in how we treat each other. That line drew a stir, not applause. It wasn't that kind of setting, but the shift in energy was undeniable. Some reporters glanced at each other knowingly. The clip was already writing itself for the evening broadcasts for the next few minutes. It became a chess match in real time. Trump, with his quick, aggressive moves, meant to dominate Obama with his patience. Each response crafted deliberate landing, not with force, but with weight. Trump, you left us divided. Obama, division doesn't start with the people. It starts with leaders. Trump, I rebuilt strength. Obama, strength without wisdom becomes weakness in disguise. Each exchange felt like a tightening rope. The press scribbled, cameras were the audience outside the room. Millions watching from living rooms, break rooms, classrooms could feel the rising pressure in one corner of the room. A reporter whispered into his phone, live streaming to his editor. He's not raising his voice, but every sentence feels like a counterpunch. Trump's frustration began to show. His gestures grew sharper, his tone louder, but the more he pressed, the calmer. Obama became, it was a mirror of contrast. Two men, two styles, two visions of leadership playing out live on television. Then something subtle happened. The reporters who had started the event, scribbling down Trump's words, now leaned forward with their pens following Obama. Their attention shifted without them realizing it. The headline was no longer about Trump's jab. It was about Obama's response. The room could sense where this was going. Something was building. Obama's rhythm was tightening, his pauses growing more deliberate. He was walking the audience closer to that one sentence everyone would remember. Trump noticed too. He interrupted louder this time. "You had your chance, Barack. People remember you failed." Obama didn't break eye contact. He leaned slightly closer to the microphone. His voice measured. "Failure isn't when you fall. Failure is when you stop caring about who falls with you." The words landed hard. There was a collective intake of breath, not just from the reporters in the room, but from the millions watching at home. It was a warning shot, a taste of the bigger moment to come. Trump muttered something into his mic, trying to reclaim ground, but the energy had already shifted. The journalists, scribbling, weren't writing Trump's lines anymore. They were circling Obama's. The silence stretched again, not empty but loaded. Obama stood steady every pause, intentional, letting the moment expand. It wasn't yet the knockout line, but you could feel it coming. But before that moment could arrive, the tension in the room had to climb even higher, and Trump was about to give him the opening he needed. Trump gripped the podium with both hands, now leaning forward, his voice louder and sharper than before the jab had landed the way he wanted. But Obama's calm replies were beginning to shift the mood of the room. Trump sensed it, and if there was one thing he never allowed, it was losing control of the stage. "Don't be fooled," he barked, pointing at the crowd of journalists and then at Obama. This man had his time, and what did he leave behind? Broken promises. He left America weak. He left jobs overseas. He left the world laughing at us. That's the truth nobody here wants to say. The room filled with the clattering of keyboards. Some reporters were already writing headlines, others staring at Obama to catch his reaction. Trump thrived on this. He could feel eyes on him, and for a moment he leaned into it. He raised his voice again. "You know what he gave us? Talk, just talk." He went around the country telling everyone what they wanted to hear. But when it came time to deliver, nothing, and you all know it. The attack was harsh, the kind of language that played well to his base. A reporter from Ohio whispered under her breath, "He's going all in." Obama stood a few feet away, motionless, his hands loosely folded in front of him. His expression didn't change. He didn't interrupt. That silence seemed to bother Trump even more, as though his words weren't cutting deep enough. Trump pushed harder. 8 years, 8 long years. He left us with division, with chaos, with people who stopped believing in their own country. And now he wants to stand here and pretend he's some kind of leader. The words echoed in the chamber, bouncing off the walls. Trump's supporters in the back nodded approvingly, a few even whispering encouragement. The camera zoomed in tighter, catching every flicker of expression on both men's faces. Obama finally shifted slightly, turning his head toward Trump, and gave the smallest of smiles. It wasn't arrogance. It was almost weary, as if he had heard this tune before. The subtle gesture caught the eye of nearly everyone in the room. Trump noticed too. "You think this is funny? You think America's a joke?" He raised his hand in mock imitation, mimicking Obama's calm demeanor. Cool guy, smooth talker. But cool doesn't fix problems. Cool doesn't keep people safe. Cool doesn't pay the bills. The press reacted with quiet gasps and murmurs. This wasn't just a jab anymore. It was a full-on barrage. Trump had taken the stage as though it was a rally, but this wasn't a rally. It was a bipartisan event filled with lawmakers, reporters, and cameras feeding live coverage across the nation. A journalist from Minneapolis whispered into her phone, "He's trying to bury Obama right here in real time." Trump wasn't finished. He turned slightly toward the cameras, speaking as if directly to the millions watching at home. "Barack Obama gave you words, I give you results." Don't forget that the statement was bold, forceful, and rehearsed in its rhythm. It drew nods from his aides standing at the back. They knew that for his base, this was the kind of soundbite that would make the evening news. Obama still hadn't spoken again. He remained in place, breathing evenly, his posture unshaken, but his silence wasn't weakness. It was strategy. Those who had followed him closely over the years knew he was waiting for the perfect opening, one that Trump himself would eventually hand to him. The silence stretched, and Trump filled it with more words. "You left us behind. Barack, you left cities in ruins. You left small towns forgotten. You left people without hope. And now you want to stand here and act like the hero." That final word, hero, came out, laced with contempt. Trump's voice rose to nearly a shout, filling the chamber. For a moment it seemed like the energy of the room tilted fully his way. His words were sharp, his delivery fierce to many watching. It looked like he was in control, but not everyone saw it that way. Some reporters began noticing the contrast between the two men. One was fighting with every ounce of force he could summon. The other was still quiet, deliberate, and that contrast, though subtle, was beginning to speak louder than the words themselves. A veteran photographer from Detroit muttered to his colleague, "He's burning hot, but Obama's just waiting." You can tell, and indeed that was the truth, because the more Trump pressed, the more he revealed his tone grew harsher, his words more cutting, but his composure thinner. Obama, by doing almost nothing, was already bending the balance of the moment. The press leaned forward. Something was coming. The tension wasn't in what Trump was saying anymore. It was in what Obama hadn't said yet. But before Obama could deliver his answer, Trump decided to push one insult too far, and that's when everything began to shift. The final insult lingered in the air, sharp and personal. Trump had leaned into the microphone, his words aimed like arrows. "You weren't just weak, Barack. You were the biggest mistake this country ever made." The room gasped. A few reporters dropped their pens for a second. Others exchanged glances, their eyes wide. Even for Trump, this was a line that cut deeper than usual. He grinned, satisfied, expecting Obama to either shrink back or lash out. But Obama didn't shrink, and he didn't lash out. He shifted his weight, adjusted the cuff of his suit jacket, and stepped forward. The sound of his shoes against the floor was faint. But in the silence that followed Trump's words, it echoed with a strange authority. The cameras moved with him swinging on their mounts to capture the approach. Reporters sat straighter. The silence was unnerving, not because it was empty, but because it was filled with expectation. Obama reached the podium. He didn't rush. He didn't try to wrestle the microphone away. He simply placed his hand on it, tilted it slightly toward him, and looked out across the room. His gaze moved slowly, first across the journalists, then the aides, then the cameras, and finally it landed on Trump. For a few seconds he didn't speak. He just held Trump's stare. The smirk on Trump's face twitched, his confidence momentarily checked by the stillness of the man in front of him. Obama finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. "I think we all came here today for a different reason." The room seemed to exhale all at once. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it was enough to cut through the barrage of insults and redirect the focus. The contrast between the two men had never been clearer. Trump fiery and loud, Obama measured and unshaken. A reporter near the front row scribbled contrast of leadership styles, silence versus noise. Trump scoffed, raising his hand as if to wave him off. "Here we go. The lecture, folks. I've heard this 1,000 times. He's going to talk about unity. He's going to talk about hope. And none of it ever happened." Obama didn't flinch. He leaned slightly into the microphone. His tone unchanging. "Hope isn't a policy. It's a direction. It's a compass without it." Leaders wander the line, drew murmurs from the press, not loud applause. This wasn't a rally, but the kind of reaction that told you people were already repeating it under their breath. It was the kind of phrase that could headline an article or play well on television. Trump's face tightened there. It is words that's all you ever had. Nice words. People want action, not poetry. Obama turned slightly toward the cameras, not Trump, his expression calm. Words matter. They set the course without the right words. Action is blind. The contrast was building like a slow storm. Every sentence Obama gave wasn't just a reply. It was a reflection of Trump's own energy, inverted. The louder Trump became, the quieter and steadier Obama grew. A journalist from Arizona whispered, "He's not even matching his tone. He's turning it against him." Trump slammed his hand on the podium again. "You failed this country, Barack. Admit it. Look the American people in the eye and admit it." Obama's eyes lifted toward the cameras, then back at Trump. His voice stayed soft, but the weight behind it carried through the room. "I don't see failure when I look at this country. I see people who never gave up, even when leaders did, that landed differently." The room reacted with a subtle shift. The words weren't aimed at Trump directly. They were aimed at the people watching, millions of them across living rooms, classrooms, workplaces. People who might have felt overlooked or dismissed suddenly felt included. Trump laughed bitterly, shaking his head. "You're good at this. I'll give you that, smooth. But people are tired of smooth. They want real." Obama glanced at him briefly, then back at the room. Real doesn't mean loud, real means lasting. The press scribbled faster, the exchanges had turned into a rhythm insult, insult, counter. But with each turn, Obama's presence grew stronger, not because of volume, but because of weight. Reporters could feel it. The photographers could feel it. Even Trump's aides in the back, shifting uncomfortably, could feel it. Obama wasn't just answering insults, he was reframing the moment. He was reminding everyone of the power of composure. The tension in the room was reaching its peak. Everyone could sense it. The words had escalated. The insults had sharpened and the contrast had become undeniable. Obama was no longer just defending himself. He was preparing to redefine the entire exchange with a single sentence. The cameras zoomed in close, ready. Reporters leaned forward. Pens hovering above paper. Millions at home were locked in waiting, but before Obama delivered the line that would change everything, the room needed to reach absolute silence. And Trump, without knowing it, was about to hand him that silence. For a moment, Trump stood frozen at the podium. His last outburst had been loud enough to shake the microphones, but his voice didn't carry the same weight anymore. He had pushed the exchange to its breaking point, and in doing so, he had given the room exactly what it needed. Quiet. The hush was heavy, charged. Even the air conditioning seemed to fade into the background. Reporters barely breathed, their pens hovering over their notepads. Waiting cameras zoomed in so close you could see the crease above Obama's brow. Obama didn't rush. He straightened his posture, one hand resting lightly on the podium, the other hanging by his side. He glanced at Trump, not with anger, not with smugness, but with something steadier, the kind of look you give someone when you're about to finish a conversation, not continue it. Then, in a voice that carried across the room without strain, Obama said the line, "A president doesn't prove himself by tearing people down. He proves himself by lifting people up." The silence afterward was immediate and absolute. No scribbling, no whispers, no clattering of keys. Just stillness. Every reporter, every aide, every camera operator knew. They had just heard the sentence that would define the day. Trump blinked, his lips parted as if to form a retort, but nothing came out for the first time in the exchange. He looked caught, not outsmarted in a policy debate, but outmatched in presence. Obama let the words hang there, not filling the silence, not backtracking, not explaining. He didn't need to. The sentence carried its own weight. It was clear, sharp, and impossible to twist without sounding smaller for it. A reporter from Indianapolis mouthed, "That's the headline." Another from Dallas whispered, "That's going viral tonight." Trump tried to lean into his microphone again. He stopped, realizing anything he said now would only echo against what had just been said. His hand gripped the podium tighter, knuckles white. Obama turned his gaze back to the room. "That's why I came here today, to talk about education, to talk about the next generation, because they're the ones who will decide what kind of leaders we deserve." The transition was seamless. He had dropped the sentence, landed the blow, and then pivoted back to his original purpose, as if refusing to let Trump dictate the agenda. Reporters scribbled furiously, now their pens racing across pages, some typed with urgency, knowing their editors would demand clips and quotes within minutes. Trump stood back, lips tight, eyes narrowing. His smirk was gone. He muttered something under his breath, but the microphones didn't catch it. The cameras, however, caught his face and image that would soon spread almost as fast as Obama's words. The exchange wasn't loud, but its power came from contrast. Trump's noise had dominated the first half of the event, but Obama's single sentence had reframed everything. He didn't need volume. He didn't need theatrics. He needed one line placed at the perfect moment, with the entire nation watching. In the back of the room, a young reporter whispered to herself, "That's what restraint looks like. That's what leadership looks like." And outside the room, in living rooms, coffee shops, and offices across the country, people would soon be repeating the line themselves. It was simple enough to remember, powerful enough to share, and layered enough to carry meaning far beyond that single moment. Obama adjusted the microphone slightly. His voice, even again, we can argue all day about policies, about numbers, about who gets credit. But at the end of the day, leadership is about service. It's about whether you leave people stronger than you found them. He didn't look at Trump when he said it. He looked at the cameras as if speaking directly to the American people. And for those watching, that distinction mattered. Trump exhaled sharply into his microphone, his frustration audible, more speeches he muttered, but the words fell flat. They didn't carry the same punch anymore, not after Obama's line had already crystallized in the minds of everyone present. Reporters turned their focus almost entirely to Obama, now their questions ready to pivot away from Trump's jabs and toward the statement that had just reset the narrative. And the longer Obama stood there, calm, unwavering, the more it became clear that the moment was his, but the true impact of that sentence wouldn't be felt in the room. It would be felt hours later when millions across the country began to share it, clip it, and debate it. The moment after Obama's words landed stretched like an eternity. You could feel it in the air. The kind of silence that comes only when everyone realizes they've just witnessed something significant. The press briefing wasn't about education anymore. It wasn't even about Trump's insult. It was about that single sentence. The reporters looked stunned. Some pressed their earpieces, whispering updates to editors on the other end of the line. A few others scribbled the exact quote across their notepads in oversized letters, afraid to misquote it. Photographers leaned forward, shutters snapping, furiously desperate to capture Obama's steady expression and Trump's faltering posture. Trump tried to laugh it off. He raised a hand dismissively, as though brushing away Obama's words like dust. "You see more speeches, always speeches." His voice was louder than necessary, cracking slightly at the edges. But the reporters weren't writing that down. Their attention had shifted. Obama didn't return fire. He simply stepped back from the podium, folding his hands loosely in front of him, letting the room breathe. It was an unusual move. He wasn't filling the silence, he was letting others do it for him. And they did. A reporter from San Diego shouted out, "Mr. President, do you have a response to what Obama just said?" The question addressed to Trump sounded almost rhetorical. The moment belonged to Obama. Now Trump stiffened, gripping the podium tighter. "I told you already, people are tired of words. They want action. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm president." His tone grew defensive, less triumphant than before. Obama tilted his head slightly, not mocking, but as if acknowledging Trump's frustration without needing to address it. He didn't have to. The sentence was still hanging in the air, replaying in everyone's mind. Another reporter called out, "Mr. Obama, can you expand on what you meant by lifting people up?" Obama stepped back toward the microphone, his voice calm, deliberate. "I mean that leadership isn't about making yourself the center of every story. It's about reminding people they matter and making sure they know they belong." The murmurs in the room rose again, the energy shifting towards something almost reverent. Even journalists who had covered him for years, who had grown used to his cadences, felt the pull of his words. Trump leaned closer to his mic, his tone sharp. And what good did that do? 8 years and the country was worse off. But the words didn't land the way they had earlier. They felt reactive, now defensive. Even some of the reporters who normally favored Trump's side looked down at their notepads, hesitant to meet his eye. Obama didn't respond to the jab. He simply looked back at the cameras, his expression steady. The measure of leadership isn't in what you tear down, it's in what you leave standing. Gasps rose again. It wasn't loud, it wasn't flashy, but it was undeniable. The cadence of his words was clean, precise, and impossible to spin without sounding petty in comparison. Trump turned toward the journalists, his voice rising. "You see what he does? He talks like it's a sermon. That's not leadership, that's performance. You want a performer? Go to Hollywood." But the damage was done. His attempt at humor didn't draw laughs. It drew silence. Reporters were too busy recording Obama's words, too busy framing the story already writing itself, one journalist whispered to another. "This isn't about fact-checking anymore. This is about tone." And Obama just took the high ground across the room. Aides from both sides shifted uncomfortably. Even Trump's own staff, standing in the shadows at the back, looked uneasy. They knew how this would play on television, how easily that single sentence could outshine an entire press event. The camera zoomed in again on Obama. His expression was composed, unflustered, for the millions watching at home. It was an image that said more than words. Calm against chaos, dignity against insult. Trump's frustration grew visible. He tapped the podium, his face reddening. Don't let him fool you. He failed this country. Don't forget that. But the line fell flat. It felt like an echo, not a punch. A veteran reporter from Philadelphia scribbled in the margin of her notes. He lost the room. Obama didn't gloat. He didn't smile or shake his head. He simply stepped back again, hands still folded as if to signal that he had said enough and that restraint. The refusal to fight fire with fire only amplified